although you have the formal degree, your artistic practice doesn't necessarily look like the way that dance is supposed to be. You've done something far more, I think, interesting, interdisciplinary and innovative with that.
If you ever question why you're going to do something creative, like a creative practice or art or whatever you're going to do, and you put it out in the world and in public, that visibility isn't selfish. It becomes a generous point of entry for people to, like we're saying, like to become your community. So actually you're really externalizing something that's needed so people can find you and to find each other.
Welcome, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to have with us today Sarah Brahim, who is joining us from Italy, actually, and has taken out time from a really busy schedule to be able to do this amazing workshop that I'm very excited to join as well. Sarah Brahim is an artist that I got to know just this year, actually. Somebody whose work I had, seen a little bit about and then got really curious and decided to keep clicking on Instagram to see what more of these like beautiful hand gestures and movements can I learn about. And then I had the chance to connect with her and to learn more about her practice directly. And then that's when I decided to invite her to join our class. So Sarah is a visual and performance artist from Saudi Arabia who works across a variety of mediums. And her work is mainly focused on the body. She trained at San Francisco Conservatory of Dance, where she has a BFA, but she also has a BS from Oregon in health and science. So she focused on medical anthropology and public health. So she really does this kind of multidisciplinary perspective on the body from like various standpoints. And in her own words, her work examines how gestures of the body create a language that can be used to voice grief, metamorphosis, the unseen form, and our relationship to the natural world. So she's really interested in transformation through movement. She's participated in a variety of exhibitions here in the UAE. She was in As We Gaze Upon Her. Many of you might have gone to that exhibition in Warehouse 421, but also in Saudi Arabia, like at Ether Gallery, The Dance of the Olive Tree and the Wind, among many other exhibitions. I'm really hoping that Sarah will also be joining us here at NYU Abu Dhabi perhaps next semester as an artist in residency as part of the Haraka Experimental Lab for Arab Art and Social Thought that I run, which is part of the Embodied Arab Center for the Study of Art. So I'm really, really pleased to have her with us. And the way we're going to do this today is I'm going to talk to Sarah just for like 10 minutes or so, really about some examples of her practice to give you guys a kind of more concrete idea about the kind of work that she does, what Sarah's research is like as somebody who is interested in performance and in the body. I'm specifically interested in these questions because our class is going to be embarking on a self-tracing assignment where the kind of core purpose of that assignment is to really think about and activate the body as a source of knowledge. And so in this dialogue with Sarah, I hope that some of us might be inspired or kind of think in ways that we hadn't already about what it means for us to tap into things like embodied reading or embodied reactions to material that we share in the classroom. Okay, after that, we have about 20 minutes where Sarah is actually going to walk us through a sort of experience based on her research, and she'll tell you a little bit more about that. So Sarah, welcome to our virtual classroom.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be.
I can't tell you how happy I was actually when I first stumbled on your work, because I had been really trying to think about like what kind of experiences can I bring to students in my classroom as we really try to move away from the kind of traditional pedagogical forms that unfortunately universities sometimes still have. And so when I learned about your work, I thought, wow, this would be a really amazing person to kind of speak to. And the reason I say this is not just because you work on the body and on performance, but it's that you yourself have a very kind of interesting and critical take on pedagogical approaches. And so I recall from our conversation around your own experience with dance, and why is it that you decided to do dance differently? So although you have the formal degree, but actually your take on it, your artistic practice doesn't necessarily look like the way that dance is supposed to be. You've done something far more, I think, interesting, interdisciplinary and innovative with that. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I trained in all of these technical styles since I was 3. It was my whole world, everything I knew. And I'm really grateful for those teachers and for those languages because it teaches you so much: discipline, musicality, performativity, all of that. But when I finished kind of my last training, was in a conservatory in London. It was kind of this time when my body had been really beaten down and really being taken over by other people's ideas for many years, and very few opportunities for me to have my own. So it just felt like the moment where the industry wasn't aligning with my morals and like ethics, and neither was the communication. So I basically unskilled as much as possible my body and tried to make, okay, it's impossible for me to know really, but how would I move if it was just a natural body that was like articulate in expression? Like, how would that look and how would that move? Because that felt a little more resonant to me than some almost like language that only few people know and know how to dissect and understand. And then the other thing that called to me was just the whole aspect of using the body as a medium for collective care, for gathering, and for a space of personal and communal transformation, which isn't the intention of dance. When you go to a dance class, typically it's about, you know, participating, listening, being active, being physical. And that's not necessarily what I'm interested in doing. I'm kind of interested in the progression of the person, and essentially just the simple idea that moving changes who you are by way of discovering the inside, the internal to the external, and therefore makes the community a better space, and therefore impacts, yeah, basically what we do on the dance floor matters is like what I genuinely think, to say it the most simply. So those spaces, much like a university class, aren't always spaces for everybody to talk and for everybody to listen. It's, you know, being put at you in one direction. So yeah, art and multidisciplinary practice changed the hierarchy of that for me and allowed me to be and to put my intentions at the center. Yeah.
That's really great. And you know, Sarah, in some ways, the kind of analogy I would argue to kind of some of this learning, unlearning that you're describing is a desire to kind of, in our case, situate the text. So as we read materials that are often part of the syllabus and part of what is considered to be, I guess, a sort of collection of things that are important, written by important people in the world who are knowledgeable or experts. How do we engage with those things while at the same time not losing sight of who we are, but being able to really understand that, you know, any text is produced by a particular person in a, you know, particular point in time and in a geography, and that those things really matter. So I really appreciate what you're saying about thinking about how you need to almost unlearn things that your body had been trained to do in order to get to a place where you can feel your body. And in fact, this question of unlearning and healing seems to be a big part of your work. And so in some ways, you know, what I've understood about your practice is that you are really interested in this question of how do we heal both internally and externally? And that by engaging art, we can sort of use that as a vehicle for healing. And so I was wondering if you could actually tell us a little bit about, this work that you had produced, Roofless, which is really kind of about the connection between the human body and external forces in the natural world. Tell us a little bit more about this internal, external work that you're interested in engaging with.
Yeah, for sure. So right after I graduated that program I mentioned, I just went into I was just being as instinctual as humanly possible to discover what's my practice and what's my interest and my creativity, like thinking about it, but more doing, And so I would go out to spaces I felt, grabbed my curiosity, a space that you want to be in, you want to explore. And I just do what I called sessions. Like I would just record myself, improvise, interact, maybe set myself tasks or really try to deeply listen to what the space was calling me to do. And then I'd spend hours watching them after and kind of analyzing what happened. So trying to have a really authentic experience and then figure it out what that was later. And I still do that as like a core piece of my practice, because I think, having something genuine first is really important. So that piece, Roofless, is a film. I made it on my phone, propped up against my shoe in South London, in a brutalist, what do they call it there? Like a social housing. So a brutalist architect had made a council estate with this playground that had these geometric shapes, like really harsh concrete. And then there was like a circle cut out of one and some angular squares. And I thought, what were they thinking designing this for children? So it made me want to understand myself, what was interesting, what could be played with it, and how my body could leave an imprint on the space, as well as the space leaving an imprint on me. And that's also, in our lives, subject to time. The more time we spend in a space, the more we feel an imprint of that place inside of us. And maybe vice versa. Can we have an impact on an architectural space through collective memory, for example? So that was really an exploration. I felt this contrast between like the softness of flesh and the like rigidity of the concrete. And then just seeing how the body like fit into this pre-designed space and forced and confined, and it makes you feel a certain way. And if you're listening to that, then it can go in any pathway you want. It could go into a form, like you're looking at forms and you're feeling forms. It could go into experiential. I felt a lot of heaviness, to be honest, because it didn't feel like what I related to a childhood space should look like. So it was a little bit of a comment on that. But I guess with the internal, external, as an artist, there's this known thing that you're not really making up new things, you're just combining lots of others. And I do feel like that is a crux of my being, but something I really believe in. Like I do feel like I'm seeing things and I'm combining things that I don't see other people doing. And that makes me excited because it makes me want to share. So like bringing for example, something I learned in Chinese medicine about pain and how to release pain in the body into an artistic form, into an architectural form, is a connection that hasn't been made. And then you're making new resonant symbols for other people to like experience and learn themselves through that. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. And actually, this is like the kind of perfect connection to the second question that I had for you, which also touches on questions of temporality, the body, and what it means to take something that was created in a particular kind of space or in a particular kind of discipline and then use it to do something in a different kind of space. So you have this work, Who We Are Out of the Dark. And it's a sort of, actually, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about it. But in particular, I'm interested in how you worked with this theory of epigenetics, where you were exploring how the kind of ancestral body that experienced hardship can have a sort of resonance or effect many, many years, decades after, and what that looks like. So that's a different kind of temporality than the one that you just described. But I would be curious to learn more about this particular project and your understanding of the body there.
Yeah, so this relates a lot, I think, to the assignment that you guys are working on in the class, or will work on, in that when you're talking about, you know, the body being a vessel of knowledge, it's not about you being born and accumulating knowledge. For example, us breathing today is evidence of the very first breath and the very first life that ever happened, because women have had to carry two things, the breath and the essence of life. And if that hadn't continued until now, those things wouldn't exist. So immediately we're thinking back to our body came from the first body. It had to have, you know, and that continuation is something, I don't know, it's like a lineage that feels really special when you think about like that you're really a continuation of this. And epigenetics is a factual genetic theory that basically proves, because at one point your grandmother and your mother shared one body. When your mother was an egg inside of your grandmother, for that 9 months you shared the body, actually a very formative impact happened, which is that you didn't just inherit the genetic biological traits, but also the sociological and physiological traits of her accumulated life, and, you know, also the 3 lives or more before her. So they have discovered that this leaves a presence in our body. How you interpret that is still very open. For me, it came about in the form of grief. So when I experienced a big loss in my life, it just hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Like I had infinite unexplained pain, out of control moments where I just didn't recognize like my rationality and my experience were just in 2 different worlds. And I just kept thinking and reading and trying to figure out where was this coming from. And then I realized, okay, like I genuinely think it was from a lot of other pain in my family. And then like it just came out through me, through this one experience. And that was the impetus for this project. So from there, I became fascinated by this idea, and I wanted to try to capture through my research articulated gestures that I felt captured grief. So that started by me recording my hands, just like without myself in the screen, and for hours and hours, and narrating songs, narrating voices I'd recorded and stories, and basically designing a new physical language that I felt captured that. So that became a live performance, the video research, and then me performing in front. That was the first iteration of the project. And then it became textiles, because I realized I wanted to interact with nature. So I isolated some of those gestures, and using the sun to make these cyanotype prints onto this like very sheer material. Then I put those back into nature, the textile with the gesture. And for me, that was like a great practice in how your pain could be isolated from your body, and thinking about how far we exist outside of our body, how far memories of the people we experienced exist outside of our body. And also like one of my first attempts at becoming bodiless, essentially, if that's possible, and what that looks like. So I made a series of those, and I'm still adding to the gestures and adding to the language. And then it also became a film, like a 3 minutes film, that was another formatting of that gestural research that yeah, I just felt like the hands really felt the weight of that experience, and the hands are so expressive, and it's like almost like our soul can transmit through the hands as a very common tool, versus the entire body, which is a tool you have to train a lot more. So that just felt like the right descriptor for me of it.
Yeah, that's great. And so actually, this question that you're raising about, actually, it does take a long time, or it does take a lot of effort to really kind of develop an ongoing practice, where the body becomes a source of knowledge, where you're not becomes, because as you were just saying now, it already is, but somehow either we forget it, or we push it aside, or we stop really kind of listening to it. And so I was wondering if you could just, as we segue into the exercise that you're going to lead us through, maybe tell us a little bit about kind of, this idea of the body as a source of knowledge, viable source of knowledge. What are the kind of practices that you think, kind of help with that? And I say this because, one of the things that we've been trying out in our class is this idea of kind of embodied reading. So how do you pay attention to how you feel, when the words of a text run through you? So your eyes are kind of, going over the letters, and it's a thing in the head, but it's also a thing in the body. Like sometimes you have a very strong emotion that's immediately palpable, and other times it's not like that. It's like this really subtle thing that just sits there, and later you get up and you're like, I feel bad and I don't know why. So, and sometimes it's so delayed. It's like days later you're talking to somebody, and it just so happens that you refer to something, and it sort of like bubbles up, and so I was wondering if you could tell us more about this idea of the body as a source of knowledge, and the practices that could potentially go with that, especially because, hopefully the idea of this kind of self-tracing project that we're experimenting with is really to kind of move the conversation in the direction of like the personal is also theoretical, just because the thing is happening at the level of the individual doesn't mean that it's not, kind of like theory with a capital T.
Yeah. I think that that's really important, to find a balance between understanding, like truly understanding the body, but then also understanding it by way of your own experience. So it's great to be like taught something about your body, but until you feel it and play with it and use it, it doesn't become maybe so connected. Like those things kind of stay separate. And I guess I feel, I don't know what it is, by way of human nature, that really we stay on the surface of our body most of the time. Like it's not like, it's like an onion, until you dig deeper and deeper, like we don't really experience our body fully most days. Like all the ways we can sense, incredible ways we can sense, we don't always like use them, even just your eyesight. Like you don't genuinely look until somebody asks you to look at something. You're like, can you don't just eat the apple, but like check out all the colors and textures going on. It's just a natural thing that happens to us. Or we hear someone's voice tell a story, but we don't really like dissect the tone and what's interesting about it. So I feel our bodies are completely holding so much knowledge, but the tools that and practices that other people carry allow us to unlock it. Like even for me, sometimes if I'm standing in a room, I do my daily practices, I do all this stuff, but sometimes I just need someone else. I need to hear the voice from outside to tell me to let go. And then I'm like, oh, wow. There's still like this need for other people to help us. And I would say, Chinese medicine, Feldenkrais, which is a somatic practice, they all believe, and I believe this too, that you're your own teacher, but then someone else is just guiding you. So they can help you say, and they can look from the outside, let's say maybe your back pain or something, and they can suggest where to unlock, but really you're the one unlocking it. You're the one doing the effort to like breathe through that, or, they're not doing anything magical necessarily. It's just like an experienced guide. I was gonna say one other thing. Oh, practices that are helpful. For me, anything, it's really good to recognize personally what works for you, which is different for everyone, that are, I think, internal to external practices and internal to external loops. So then also, how can you grab something outside and bring it back in? So what's the most personal, intimate, tiny thing you have? And then how do you get that out? Is it through writing? Is it through listening? Is it through color? Is it through movement? It could be all of them. Your voice. But I think that it's important to discover what that loop could be, even in a small way, because it also, if you're able to share something, externalizing things helps us understand them better and helps us learn from them, and then bringing that information back in. So I think these like cycles of connection and loops are really helpful if you're trying to grow in a certain direction, to think of it that way. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Sarah, thank you. So I guess maybe this is the perfect time to allow you to guide us, through this next sort of session, and for us to maybe stop talking and listening and actually just feel.
This is just like a guided practice I do for, I don't know, I teach classes in it. I use it as a tool to understand how visualizations and textures and spaces affect us internally and therefore inform us externally, as a way to engage socially differently, with spaces differently. So it's just a very easy, calm practice like this. The main thing is, like, you never have to do anything you don't feel like doing or that makes you uncomfortable. You can always just go back to breathing. There's no judgment. You really can't do anything wrong. It's just a space for you to feel and try. So it's a space for you. So it's an offering. Yeah. And what you get from it is yours. So if we're ready, I would say just to wiggle around your space and make yourself comfortable, as comfortable as you can be. And you can close your eyes when you feel ready. You don't have to look at me or look at the screen. You just need to be able to hear. So when you're ready, just start by taking a few breaths. You could start with 3 really deep breaths. And continue to breathe. And just start to let go of the early part of your day, all this kind of chaos and noise. If you could use a volume dial, try to turn down all the noise from the part of your day until this moment. So just breathing and trying to be here. Starting with the top of your head, as you continue to breathe, just start to release any unneeded tension. So just going all the way down. So maybe behind your ears, the back of the neck, your jaw, your eyelids, any place you feel some tension, just send breath in that direction. The tips of your shoulders, Maybe take one breath and really deflate your chest. Moving down to the ribs, so you can feel them expand and contract. Sending breath to your belly, your lower back. And then the breath making this huge motion over your knees, down the legs, through your ankles, and into the floor. So then take a few breaths where you're breathing. Your inhale feels like it's hitting the top of your head. Maybe it goes outside of you. And then the exhale goes all the way through that motion down into the floor. Just this sweeping trace. Just try a few like that. Great. So continuing to breathe, I just want you to take a few seconds to think of someone you'd like to dedicate this time to, this practice. It can be anyone you like. It could even be yourself. And once you think of that person, just put them kind of in the back of your mind, in the back burner. They're here with us, but you're not thinking about it. It's just there. And continuing to breathe and release any unneeded tensions. So the first thing I will ask you to imagine is I want you to place a candle, like an old wax candle, into the center of your chest. As if, the space of your torso is this dark cavity and you're placing a candle inside. So as you breathe, you're going to light the candle. And of course, it's going to grow from a small spark to a flame. So imagine yourself putting that inside. And now it's up to you. What color does this light emit? And you can choose. Maybe it'll come to you quickly. Maybe it'll take a second. And I'd hope this color represents the color you feel like you emit. What color is the light you feel you carry? And it can be different every day, but what does it feel like today? So for now, you have this candle inside with a colored light. Breathing into that light, I want you to imagine that the light is going to grow. So the glow starts to seep slowly to fill the entire rib cage. And maybe this goes in flux with the breath, or maybe it's just a slow seeping texture. And now the glow is starting to fill the space of your shoulders, of your arms, filling up the space where your hands are. Through your neck, the back of your neck, your jaw, behind your eyes, all is this colored glow. And it becomes stronger and stronger now, going from transparent maybe to very solid, filling up the space where your pelvis is, the hips. The glow now pushing all the way through your legs, down to your feet. And just see if you can hold all of that light. Breathing and imagining that the light is full within your body. You're holding this light. Now I want you to imagine you're holding all of that light and it starts to just break through the barrier of your skin. So the glow starts to permeate out further and further through your body, and see if you can imagine that that light fills up the entire space of your room, into every crack and every corner. You're holding the space of all of this light. Let it grow naturally for you. You can always retract a bit and then try to breathe and grow it even more. Then imagine that it goes outside of those walls. So does it fill the building? Does it leave the building? How much of that light can you hold? How far can it go? Can it expand outside your city? Can you hold all of that? What does it feel like to hold it? When you feel ready, start to dim the light in your own time, bringing it all the way back down to just that one flame. So take as much time as you need to draw it all back inside of you. So if you brought it back to just the candle and just this flame, if not, take your time, but we're going to move the candle from the chest to the back of, inside the neck, the back of the neck. So start to breathe into that space. And now I'm going to challenge you to change the light, the type of light. So we're going from a natural light, candle light, to more an artificial light. So I want you to imagine the entire space of the back of your neck is now a lighthouse. You can imagine you're this pillar on the sea, or you can be a lighthouse in your room. And just start to move through the back of your neck, the light. So playing with how the light shines on your floor, behind you, on the walls next to you. Starting small, but bringing motion into the body by directing this light. Are there any places that you can't reach with the light? So continuing always with this light, these small motions with your breath, we're going to add a second layer. So you have the lighthouse of your neck, but then I want you to imagine where your collarbones start is this floor coming across your shoulder blades. And the floor is white and full of steam. And its steam is going to rise through your neck, up through your head, and just cleanse everything. So the floor is here at your collarbones. You have your light, and it's going to make the light misty, but it's just clearing out everything you don't need. The light is moving in this fog, and there's this cleanse kind of washing over you. Try to bring even more movement into the back of the neck. So your light is becoming more dynamic, more sure of itself. So you have this light at the top, and now everything below that light is going to become seawater. Very strong and heavy. So everything that moves below your neck is this strong, heavy, thick seawater. And what motion or what dynamic does that water have for you today? It can be very soft, heavy. You can feel storm, quite turbulent, all through your rib cage, your belly. Can you move as if all of the bones in that section of your body could liquefy? They always have been liquid. And how can your breath change and create the motion of the water? Like how the moon pulls the waves. How can your breath be the moon to that water? And imagine this water is everything. It's the space behind your knees, the space under your feet, even the light in your neck. Everything is being pushed and pulled with the current. And allow yourself to feel the maximum of this. So if you're moving now, at this point, let's call that 30%. See if you can take yourself to 80, 90%. So let it grow, let it fill you, and take yourself on this small adventure. So maybe you start to create a storm in a place that feels interesting to you. So this rocking motion with the pelvis, a figure 8 through the ribs and the shoulders. See what you can find. How far can you take it? Can you surprise yourself? Maybe you have splashes of motion and water clashing together in the center, or you feel everything is exiting and flowing outside. How is this making you feel heavy or light? So maybe now you're around 50%. Try to bring even more movement into the body. Start from the center where we started. So really feeling this water weight pulling you and pushing you. Building it up more, letting there be even a little bit of heat in the body. Is the water you feel sparkling? Is it dark? Is it thrashing? Try to find for just a few, for 1 minute, this place where you're moving the water, but also the water is moving you. So you're making some decisions, but you're also just letting it happen at the same time. Now you're at your peak, whatever that place you got to is, and you can slowly start to quiet the water as slow as possible. Until the sea that you are is just completely still. Like how it is after a storm, just so quiet. Everything is amplified. You start to hear the sound of your breath again. You go back to these really deep breaths. Keep breathing. And just come back to that person that we've thought of. Just for a moment. Maybe you can imagine a memory with them. The first thing that crosses your mind. And when you feel ready, start to dim the light and put a close on this stormy water. So you just feel this dark cavity of the body completely quieted. And take 2 more deep breaths. Just clear your mind of any thoughts. And when you feel ready, you can start to come back to the room. Open your eyes. Oh.
So everyone,
Maybe
all our classes were a little bit like this.
maybe you need like a little shake after that, or like you know, give yourself some touch, yeah. I'm sorry it's so short. I could really go on for many other things. But
actually, it's interesting, you know, had I known it was going to be like this, I might have also suggested that we stand rather than sit. I don't know how many people were standing, but I was sitting. And then at some point, my storm got a little too big. I was like, oh, maybe I should have been standing.
Yeah, you can do also standing, you know, laying on the floor. I think as long as you're, you know, comfortable, you can stretch the imagination. So yeah, thank you guys for staying with me on that and trying it. I know it can be a lot. It's something that I said earlier, it's a practice. So it's not something you're supposed to do one time. It's really how to build this level of comfort with yourself and your imagination and all these layers of letting go that are very necessary. I'm sure you felt a few times like yourself making some kind of in and out, but it's super normal. It's just learning yourself more and more, and how you can utilize kind of that type of information to tackle things, whether that's very serious things or just exploring. You want to know your body better and more as a tool. Yeah.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you so much. And I have to say, although I kind of did this with you once before, it was a bit different. It wasn't the exact same one. But I found myself in the context of a classroom being actually like feeling self-conscious, weirdly, even though my eyes were closed. But I felt at various points, especially when sort of you were describing moving from kind of more of a C to something more intense, I felt myself almost resisting to do that because I'm like, oh, all these, my students are there and it's going to look a bit weird if one of them is peeking through and, you know, sees me like, you know, and then sort of, you know, deciding to, well, just try it and trust, you know.
Yeah. No, I know. I think that's super normal. And like Zoom is not an ideal place for this, but at least we can do it at all. But I think that's just normal. And I think actually when you do peak and you see people, it makes you be like, oh, they're really into it. I want to go back and be really into what I'm doing. So I think it's actually like, you just need to know that everyone's with you and you're not judging yourself. Nobody's judging each other. So it's okay. Normal.
Okay, great. So I'd love to kind of open the floor and see if anybody has any questions or even just reflections that they want to share with Sarah at this point. I think we decided, Sarah and I, to actually save the Q&A for after the experience rather than after the conversation, because she felt actually that it would be really great for people to try it first, because that also might change the nature of questions that you have.
I think this type of thing ideally is something, in a crazy ideal world, we get together as a group every other morning and we do it for 2 hours. And it is a whole process where sometimes you cry and you don't know why you're upset, but this particular thing helped you release that. Or maybe you laugh really hard and you like can't figure it out, but you're just like, wow, life is bliss. So I think you know, it can kind of hit all these different triggers. But like I was saying earlier, you need an access point, and you need someone to kind of slow you down and go to the inside a little bit in order to understand, you know, our lives are so chaotic and so noisy. So I feel like these points of focus even are just really intense because we don't have them frequently at all. And then how I deal with like internal, external, I guess I feel really comfortable at this point, which is hard for me to then say what to do, because I'm quite okay with crying in a room of people. And I like when I teach these classes, I encourage it, like if that's how you really feel, because I genuinely don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. And I think like when someone's being vulnerable, it allows other people to as well. So just, I guess, how I approach it genuinely, like a workshop I did yesterday or the day before, the similar thing is I just try to come as my truest self to every experience on the day and just try to listen to what I need on that day. So especially if there's things you're uncomfortable with, you need to kind of protect yourself. So go as far as you can with what you feel comfortable, and take the most out of that. But you don't, you know, you can always leave what isn't useful for you. Even if somebody didn't frame it for you that way, you always have that permission. And that's a really useful tool. Because sometimes when you go into a setting, people set it up in a certain way and you feel limited, but always know there's that choice of like, oh, I actually only thought this piece was interesting. I'm just going to go with that and run in that way. And that's something I would do. And then if you have a day where you feel so good, you feel very comfortable, as many layers of letting go you can humanly have. Like every time you get that self-conscious wall, think, I want to feel more and care less. I want to feel more and care less. Because at the end of the day, like how we look doesn't matter at all. Like our memories are based on how we feel. We don't see ourselves experiencing things. So as much as you can amplify that for yourself, I think the gain is gonna reside there. So yeah, if you're having a day where you feel very comfortable, I would say as much as you can, try to experience that. In any type of creative process. But yeah. I don't really classify it in those words specifically because they have varying intentions. Like yoga means breath in Sanskrit, but I find yoga nowadays isn't necessarily breath work. It's maybe more physical goals. Depends on the teacher. And meditation, you know, is some variants of connecting the mind and body and breath. But again, really depends. So I mean, they exist in the same realm for sure, but I wouldn't, it's all for me about the intention. So I think, like I said, we really needed so much more time, but the goal of this, and kind of what May asked me about, is to kind of discover that there are these tools to unlock. I know it's strange when a bad thing comes up, but this is all the information in the body. This is the things that, you know, maybe it occurs to you and you just let it pass, or maybe it's something you should actually deal with after the exercise or think about. So, you know, the body tries to tell us all kinds of things, and then you also have options of how to respond. There's not just like one way. So I think it's really hard to describe, and I'm still thinking about it constantly, like what healing is. But I do think it starts with acknowledging all types of senses, all types of memories, and all types of feelings. And then I think you can gain a lot of tools to discover for yourself how you want to experience those things as well. Yeah.
Sarah, I wanted to ask you that I think sometimes like suppressing emotions is a coping mechanism, you know, in order to get things done, or because we're in a context that requires it, you know. So you can't just simply say like, oh, I don't feel like doing this, or I don't want to do that, you know. And unfortunately, I think of a lot of like elite academic institutions put a lot of pressure on people to kind of like just be in the world a certain way, you know, with a lot of emphasis on productivity, efficiency, strength. So like vulnerability is viewed as a bad thing, a weakness, you know. And so I don't know. I was wondering if you could just share with us, in a way, how do you, if you've been through this, you know, cope with almost like oscillating between spaces where you have to rein your emotions in and maybe suppress them in order for you to do things, yet at the same time being able to let those emotions breathe so that you're also not continuously, you know, kind of pushing them.
I mean, that's so difficult. I mean, even in the arts, even in the dance world, like you would think it's such a free space, but it's also just as based on productivity and, you know, different value systems of how we should exist. I guess that is the entire reason why I committed to being an artist, is like in order to have time and like a fluctuation of being able to have that. The other thing would be, you know, creating community and finding friends and people who want to explore these type of practices, because like many people have somatic practice, many people have breath work. There's many Eastern medicine practitioners who can be guides for you to unlocking similar things. So I would say, you know, trying to like add once a week of something. And then if it really becomes a moment in your life where you can go further, take it further if you have the time. But I don't know, it's super difficult. Like I was trying to make a class in the pandemic that was literally for being seated. Like, so basically what we did, but really because we were all in front of Zoom for 12 hours and it was just too much. So even just, you know, activating the seated body. But, you know, like I said, like you really do need a guide. Obviously you're doing everything by yourself, but it's just, if we didn't do this class today, you would just continue working on your laptop and like going here and there and everywhere in the same body. So yeah, it's something I struggle with too, to be honest.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate not only your honesty, but also your generosity of spirit. You know, I mean, I think this kind of last point that you made about community is really, really important. That actually, you know, operating in the world kind of as individuals is a really kind of weird way of being. And that in fact, if we can think of even these kinds of very basic needs, like around the body and around recentering and grounding and things like that, as potentially communal things, that can be really very helpful. So as we sort of inch towards the end of the semester, I hope that, you know, some of this spills over and people start to form some connections to at least one or two people in the classroom, to be these kinds of like resources, or at least people that you can go to regenerate energy, to connect with in some ways, without it being forced, but just somehow, you know, comes into play as we continue to work on our self-tracing assignments. But I don't want to speak for too long, because I feel like the good vibe of Sarah's voice, which like permeated through my screen, like I almost want to like keep that a tiny bit longer and take it with me.
Yeah, I would just say one more thing about, like, I don't know what all of your individual practices are or like interests, but because we were kind of talking about the ego and self-consciousness, I think if you ever question why you're going to do something creative, like a creative practice or art or whatever you're going to do, and you put it out in the world and in public, that visibility isn't selfish. It becomes a generous point of entry for people to, like we're saying, like to become your community. So actually you're really externalizing something that's needed so people can find you and to find each other. So I don't know, for me, something like that used to come up a lot when I was in school, like, oh, the body is really selfish, or the body, or like my, you know what I mean? Like you're doing this for yourself, but actually
self-indulgent kind of, yeah.
but it's not, because we need it. And then the more visible it is, the easier it is to be like, oh, that person's doing that thing, I'm gonna talk to them, I'm gonna run over there. And then all of a sudden you're doing something collectively, and then that feels much, much better.
That's really great, Sarah. Thank you so, so much. And, we've come to the end of our class time, and I don't want to keep people on their screens for a lot longer, but I think they'll, hopefully people will join me in saying thank you so much for like a really nice session. I really, really enjoyed that. And hopefully we keep some of this energy longer than our class together. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all for like joining and trusting in the exercise, and thank you for inviting me, May.